Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial today. We're going to be taking a look at recreating this jungle scene. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that's going to be. All right, so what we're going to need is a machete and a video camera. And what we want to do, or wait, actually, never mind. That's for something totally different. Just disregard that. What we're going to be doing is creating this jungle scene using images of some different plants. And it's going to be pretty cool. Now, this is a jungle, but there's probably somebody out there looking at this and saying, hey, those aren't plants that are from the jungle, or frankly, they're not even plants that belong in the same habitat. Well, I'm sorry you became a naturologist, but at least cut me some slack. We're just trying to make some motion graphics here, all right? So what we've done is taken 4 separate plants and randomized them and distributed them into 3D space. So the first thing that we need is some plants. So we actually have some images that are going to be preset, but I want to show you how I extracted them from the images. So inside of Photoshop, I'm using CS5 here. I've got this image of a tropical plant, and what we can do is take the quick selection tool, and it probably looks really large, but you just want to go ahead and size it up there, and then you basically just paint on the areas that you want to keep. And it's really, really fast. So we just kind of paint the main part of all these leaves. Very good. Paint that up. And if you hold down Alt, you can subtract areas. So if you accidentally add an area that you don't want, you can just hold down Alt and subtract it, so you can see what that does. And once you have a selection, I'll go ahead and just add this part back in. Once you have a selection, we can then create a matte. So to do that, just double click on the layer, turn it into a layer, hit OK, and then click on the layer mask button here. So there you go. And the other thing you can do is if you select the matte, you can choose select refine mask, and there's some cool options in here to tighten up the edge a little bit. You can turn up the contrast, and then you can shrink it or whatever to make it look a little nicer. So there you go. And then just save it off as like a PNG and import that into After Effects. So pretty straightforward. So back in After Effects, let's go and create this jungle scene or tropical forest or whatever it is. Here. Now it's a rainforest. You see how versatile these tutorials are? Amazing. Okay, let's create a new composition, 1280 by 720, 24 frames per second. We'll do 300 frames and hit OK. Very good. Let's create our title. So first thing, let's just create a title. So we'll just type in, this was my original idea, was putting welcome and then you're in the jungle. And then it didn't make enough sense, so I didn't. So we've got this title, make it a little bigger here. Cool, we'll center it. And let's pre-compose this. So one of the cool things about the way I've set this up is that you can go into the title holder and change the text, and it procedurally updates inside of the final comp, and it's got all the nice little crunchy edges and stuff. So I always like to do it that way because if there's any changes that need to get made, it's easy. So there we go. Let's pre-compose this layer, pre-compose. And that's just going to put it in its own comp. So we'll call this title holder. We'll hit OK. And we'll put this into a folder called tutorial comps, and just to put it outside here. All right, so the next thing we want to do is add the crispy edges to our title. So let's take our title holder and duplicate it. So we're going to use a copy, and we'll come over here. We're going to type in roughen edges, and we'll drop that on our comp, then hide the bottom layer. So if we look closely, we can see we have these crispy edges. We can play around with a different type, turn up the sharpness, and maybe off that border just a little bit. So we're basically just looking to add a little bit of roughness to our title. All right, so that works pretty good. Let's come back over to our project, and I've got this metal texture from cgtextures.com, and I'm going to bring it out. It's just a big image, and we're going to put it below the rough and edges title, and we're going to choose alpha matte. So now we have that version of the title, and then we have our original underneath it. And let's go ahead and add a color. So we'll come over here and we'll type in fill, and we'll take the fill effect, drop it on our title, and let's just change this to kind of a dark brown color like that. And then we'll turn the title back on. And we'll also add a curves adjustment here and darken this down just a bit. All right, and we can also add a little bit of warmth to the title using the curves adjustment. So there we go, and that's the difference there. So the next thing we want to do is add a little bit of that three-dimensionality that you can see in this title here. So if we look at it, it's got a little bit of a bevel around it, and it looks pretty nice. So let's try to do that. We'll take the metal texture. Now, instead of using the bevel effect, we're actually going to use a layer style. So we'll come in here, we'll choose layer styles and bevel and emboss. And what's great is it'll ignore the track matte setting that we set up earlier. So it's kind of handy, and we'll be able to get a nice edge. So let's go and tweak the settings here. Let's turn the size down, and that looks pretty good. So we're also going to add a little drop shadow. So we'll choose layer style drop shadow. And again, let's just tweak the settings. Maybe turn up the opacity, set the distance to 1, and the opacity, that's good, and maybe the size down to maybe 2 or maybe 1. And I think 90 degrees is straight down. So this is looking pretty good. And remember, what's great about this is we can go inside of it and make a change, and it updates with all of our rough edges. So we could stop the tutorial right there, but I'm going to keep going. We'll change this back. I don't even know what it was. Who knows? And now that it's all put together, I'm going to take all the layers, hold down Shift, and pre-compose it as one. So we'll just pre-compose, and we'll just call this the title. And we'll hit OK. So now we're going to make it a 3D layer. And then let's create a camera. So we'll hit new camera. We'll do like 35mm and hit OK. So we'll set that up. Let's also create a null object to help animate the camera. And what I need to do is turn the null object to a 3D layer. Now cameras are already basically a 3D layer, so we don't need to change anything there, but let's parent the camera to the null object. So then if we move the null object, we're actually moving the camera around with it. So that's going to be handy for just animating it a little bit more smoothly. All right, so let's go and add some plants to our jungle scene. Now you can just skip it and just say, okay, this is the jungle at night. It's really dark. But if you're doing a daytime thing, we'll just continue. So we could start with some of these plants. Actually, I'm going to take this background and put it out there, and we'll make it a 3D layer. And we want this to be a really, really far away background. So hold down Shift and just push it back in 3D space. And then we'll scale it up. And so this is basically going to be our very far away background element. Now, the next thing I want to do is animate the camera just a little bit. We want to kind of get a basic idea of what our movement is going to be. So we'll take the position, set a keyframe. By the way, I just hit P to bring up the position. And you can always just toggle or twirl the whole layer open and get to all those settings. So just like that. So we'll hit P. We'll move forward to 100 frames, and we'll set another keyframe. So we'll go back to the beginning here, and then let's just move this null object backwards in 3D space. So here we go. Probably good. So we're just kind of coming up onto the title. Now, we're kind of cutting off the edge of the background, so we'll scale it up a little bit. There we go. Now, the background doesn't look like it's moving very much because it's really, really far away. So that's kind of what we want, so that we can put all of the foreground stuff in the way. So hopefully at the end of this, we won't see any of the background. That's kind of our goal. All right, now before we move on, I want to make our title a little bit bigger. So let's open up our title and then open up our title holder. And let's just scale up this title so it's nice and large. And then we can see everything updates, so that was easy. And we'll go back into our comp here. And this is looking good. So let's start adding some of our images of our various plants. And let's just bring one of them out. We'll go and just drop it right above the title. And what I'm going to do is add some color correction. So I'm going to add a tint effect, which is there at the bottom. And we're going to change this to green. So we want this to be perfectly green, since there's a lot of various colors, but if we just make it really green and maybe just lower the opacity a bit, it'll just make the shot seem just really lush. And maybe do a quick color correction with the curves. Even just bring the blue down a little bit so it's nice and fresh looking. So cool, we'll make it a 3D layer. And then we're just going to start positioning this in 3D space. So we'll just move it kind of down. We can hit S and scale it down. And this is really the part where you just have to spend some time, duplicating layers and moving them around. And one of the things you want to do is like rotate them so that they're not all perfectly the same. And we'll duplicate some more here. One of the tricks I like to do whenever you're using, cards or like flat images is take it and then put one right behind another one and offset it. So what that's going to do is just create a little bit of a parallax, and you'll be able to just see a little bit of separation. So it might look like those leaves are actually, in 3D space. And the other really, really big thing about compositing a lot of elements that are exactly the same is various shading levels. So when you put something right behind it, your mind can't really tell that that's behind it because it looks exactly the same shade. And what you want to do is come into this and maybe darken it down a bit. And we can also add just another tint effect, which we can use to neutralize the saturation. So whenever you darken something, it can also make it look a little too saturated, so we can just tweak it there. But by giving it just a touch of darkness, your mind can easily separate that, and you can tell that one's behind another one. So if we look at my final animation here, when we go past a lot of the elements here in the foreground, I've actually darkened them down quite a bit so that they're distinctively different than the ones behind it. And that goes for all of these different elements. Like this one kind of has a light green, this one's darker. So it helps break up the duplicated look, but it also helps your mind tell that there's depth there, because if there's no parallax, meaning if they don't seem to shift, then you need something else to kind of give you that indication. So there we go. Let's take that one. Let's duplicate it again. Rotate it. We want to make sure we put stuff in front of the title and also stuff in back of the title. We've got to really put stuff everywhere so that your mind can really feel like there's a lot of stuff around. So let's just shorten this animation. There we go. F9 to smooth out the end of the animation. Cool. So let's bring in another variation. Maybe this, let's see, this number 1 plant. Again, let's take the color correction effects, copy them, and then paste them so that they look nice and green. Okay, perfect. We'll make this one a 3D layer. So every time you add a new element, just kind of run it through the process of, looking good. And there we go. We'll scale this down a bit. All right, so I'm back. Now I've distributed a bunch of layers here as randomly as possible. Put some up in the top. Make sure there's some far away. And then as you scrub through it, you can kind of see where the bare spots are. Maybe over here, it's kind of empty. And just start filling it in. And also the layers that are close to the camera, you really want to make it look fun. So you put them close to the camera and then the camera goes past them and things like that. So this is looking good. Let's just do a couple other quick things to kind of finalize this. We'll take the background here and let's turn it up a bit brighter so that it makes it seem like there's a little bit more distance there. The other thing we can do is add sort of an overall color correction. So we could just do an adjustment layer. And then also, one of the things that was helping me animate was I added a small expression, and I actually added it to the camera. So if we hit P, and you see I'll just delete this expression here. So we've got a straight shot here, but I want to add a little bit of life to the camera. So we're going to Alt-click on the position, and we're going to type wiggle 0.3, 20, and in parentheses, type that in. And now the camera is just going to have a little bit of life and a little bit of movement to it. And that really helps you see the separation and the distance. So that's that. Back to this color correction. First thing, actually, let's just do like a quick vignette. So we'll take, by the way, to hide everything, Control-Shift-H, because this will just drive you crazy. But you do need to turn it on sometimes. So we have our adjustment layer. I'm going to take the elliptical mask tool and draw a circular selection. And we'll subtract it. We'll add a curves adjustment here. So we'll darken it down a bit and then hit F to feather it. So let's make a little more space here. So that's cool. Focuses your attention a little bit better. The title. Let's take a look at the title. So come down to the title. Let's color correct it. So let's just add a little bit of contrast. And maybe go to the red channel. We'll punch that up a little bit. And the blue channel will bring that down just a touch. Now, the other thing to make it a touch 3D is we'll duplicate the title, take the lower one, and just push it back in Z-space a little bit. And then we'll tint it black. Or better yet, we could tint it, like dark brown or something like that. And just to give it a little bit of depth, we don't need to go too crazy on it, and maybe even move it up, just so it's nice and easy to read. Okay, cool. That is looking good. Finally, let's go back to the color correction that we had started, and we'll just do an adjustment layer here with curves. Give it a little bit of contrast. Maybe some warmth. Okay, nice. And then we want to add a glow sort of overall to everything. So we'll choose Stylize Glow. It's there on the list. And let's go down to the bottom and let's brighten our background up a little bit more. And then go back to the glow. And we'll turn up the threshold a bit so that we're only glowing from this back area. And then we'll turn up the radius. And then let's change the color to a more warm combination. And then turn up the intensity a bit. And then if we change it from original to AB colors, we can actually see what that looks like. That's cool. Very nice. one other thing we could do is turn on the motion blur switch for everything. So if we select everything and turn the motion blur switch on, and if we turn it on for the comp, it may take a second, but then you'll have some nice motion blur as the leaves go flying past the camera and stuff. So it's really cool to have some foreground leaves also, so that we can, get that sense. And even if you wanted to get fancy, you could do some depth of field on the camera. Turn that on, maybe crank this up a bit. So it can be a little bit slow to render, but it's got a nice, microscopic look to it, which could be interesting. It's one fun idea. Lastly, let's add sort of the micro particles that are inside of the jungle. Maybe they're bugs, I don't know. And we'll just create a solid. We'll solo it here. And you could do it a couple of ways. You could use particle world. CC particle world, or we could use particular. I would prefer to use particular, but just so everyone else can kind of follow along, I'll just use particle world. And let's set the birth rate down to about 1 and the life to 25. And then let's go down to the producer and turn up the size of the producer area. And then let's go to the physics. We'll set it to maybe twirl. Turn the velocity down, maybe 0.01, and turn the gravity off. And then let's change the particle type to a faded sphere. There we go. And 25, and then go to the, let's see, opacity map here, and let's just turn this on all the way. And what I want to do is freeze it so particles, see how it keeps new particles keep getting added? Well, I'm going to freeze it at one point in time. So come up here to the birth rate, set a keyframe, and then move forward 1 frame and set the birth rate down to 0. So everything after this point in time will stay and the particle count won't change as long as the particle life is long enough. So then we can just move the layer over and extend it. And the other thing I need to do is just turn up the radius and maybe turn the size of the particles down. So we'll set it to add. We'll unsolo it here for just a second. And that's pretty much it. We can come in here to the physics and play around with, the amount of twirl or whatever, just so the particles aren't static. And maybe moving around just a little, 0.05 perhaps. So that looks pretty good. And again, we could turn up the size of those particles. They don't have to be that small. And maybe move them up. So that's the basic idea. We've got some particles and we've got our glow. Pretty much everything I did in the original example is right here. Let's see, our background got shifted a bit. We'll just slide it over. The only thing I did differently was instead of doing a straight on animation, I added just a little bit of a camera move. And so it starts over on the right here and then it pans over to the left to kind of reveal the title. And the way I did that was just took the camera, hit R for rotation, and towards the end of the animation where I want to be rotated towards it, I set my keyframes, I hit F9, and then in the beginning, I just rotated the camera over to that direction. And then I just took the background that was already there, duplicated it, moved it over, and then rotated it, basically to fill it up. And I didn't want you to be able to see any of the seams, so I just duplicated a lot of the elements and put them over there. So the camera pans and then it comes over here. So what's cool about this is you just get a little bit more movement to your camera, And all you really need to do is just fill in that space, the area that the camera is looking at, with some extra trees. Definitely put some foreground stuff in the shot. And remember, in this particular shot, I darkened a lot of the foreground elements so that it seemed like they were getting close to the camera a little bit more. So just little details like that. You could add some of these vines kind of hanging around in 3D space. I've got a couple of them here, just layers hanging around. And all right, well, I think it's all here. I hope you guys learned some stuff. My name is Andrew Kramer. Be sure to visit the website, videocopilot.net, and look for us on Facebook and also on Twitter. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.